This is Vibe Science, a top 100 wellness podcast presented by the Radcast Network, breaking wellness barriers and making health truly personal. Here are your hosts, Ryan Alford and Chris Hansen.
Hello, and welcome to Vibe Science. We're always helping you energize, get right, get your mind right, get your body right, get your health right, because it's all about empowering you to your highest vibe. Joined, as always, by Chris Hansen in Miami. What's up, Chris?
What's up, Brian? How are you, brother?
I'm great, man. I'm excited. I'm ready to get happy. I like happiness. And look, to get happy, you have to start from the depths. Sometimes you got to go from dark to light. We might have to go from dark to light today. That's why we've got Dannie, Novo. What's up, Dannie?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm ready to get to the happiness. I know we gotta go through the woods to get there. We gotta trek through it. But Danny's a lawyer and happiness coach. We call a happy coach. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a happy coach? I want to teach happy. You know,
yeah,
should we all be happy, coach?
I wish everyone was. It would make my life a lot easier.
I know. How does one go about the path? We'll talk about your journey, but how do you define a happiness coach?
I'm really someone that helps you define happy for yourself and then have the courage to live that life. I say, if you want to be happy, you have to be brave. And where do you find that bravery? You've got to really dig deep and know the tools to do that, and then have the courage to not only listen to that voice inside of you, but to live your life in conformity with that voice. Not easy things to do.
No, it's not. And I think about the hierarchy of needs, and I'm not going down Pavlov's. I'm just going down like the Ryan Alford, the way I think about it. It's like happiness is pretty damn key, or at least like true happiness and contentment. I mean, then that's a very loaded word in itself, but I think that we're missing the boat a little bit on what true happiness is as a whole today. At least it feels that way. I don't know about you, Dannie.
I think sometimes people get confused, and I think we take on stories about ourselves that get in the way. Everybody says happiness is really important, but I don't know many people who work at it like it's important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I work at it. It's called Doritos at night in bed. But, but somehow it makes me unhappy the next day.
Oh, really?
But I think we're talking on a deeper level. There's going to be bears that Chris keeps next to him, too. He knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Momentary pleasure. Yes, guilty. I understand.
That's not dopamine, I think is what that's called.
Chasing that can be a little bit dangerous.
I know. So we're still a lawyer during the day, right?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the day. We're a lawyer when we need to be a lawyer, and we're a happiness coach when we need to be a happiness coach.
Yeah, I get it. Dannie, let's set the tables. I know we've got a good story here. I know we're going to go from darkness to light. We learned some things pre-episode that we didn't even know. It's... I think the most authentic coaches, the ones that have their own true journey. And I think that's what you have, Dannie. So I welcome you to kind of tell that story that led us here today. Yeah,
it's a long story. I mean, I honestly kind of felt anxiety and depression when I was just a kid. I remember being 7 or 8 and kind of feeling the symptoms, going to my parents and saying, something's not right. I think I'm sick. And they'd say, okay, what's wrong? And I was like, well, I'm tired and I don't really want to do the things I normally do. I played sports. I was good in school. I grew up riding horses. I loved being around the horses. And all of a sudden it was kind of like, I don't really feel like riding. Just didn't really have an energy level of a 7 or 8-year-old kid. And they just kind of brushed it off and waited a while. So then it resurfaces when hormones kick in, right? And I'm like, it's really bad now. And they're like, you're just a teenager. You're going through it. It'll pass. By the time I hit 16, I was really in a lot of trouble. And I said, look, I don't know what's going on, but I need to go to a doctor. Of course, I go to a doctor. They run all the blood tests. Everything's coming back normal. Nobody has anything to say about it. And finally, one doctor kind of took me seriously and said, hey, there's a woman who comes to my office once a week. She's a therapist. Would you sit down and talk to her? And I was like, I just want to get better. So whatever you think I need to do, cool, we'll do it. So I sat down across the desk from this woman and we just kind of hash it out. And at the end, she sits back and kind of looks at me. She says, Dannie, I think you're depressed. And I said, depressed. I mean, I don't even really know what that means, but from what I do know, I don't think that's true because I don't think you understand. I have friends. I get good grades. I mean, I have a horse. How can I be depressed? And she said, honey, I think you're depressed. And I said, okay, well, what do I do about it? Because I want to get better. So she picks up the phone, calls a doctor. Next thing you know, I'm getting bombarded by antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds. You know, it's not working. They up the dosage. Try this one, try this one. I went through every medication you could think of. And it wasn't helping. So I go off to college. Now I'm drinking while I'm on this medication, trying to find my way through life. Somehow still made it through Dean's List freshman year, right? Come home for the summer, and really crash. So I go back for sophomore year. I'm there for a few weeks and I just hit rock bottom. I'm suicidal. I can't take care of myself. So I finally had to check myself into a mental institution. And the first time I go there, you know, I'm in this room and this lockdown unit, totally scared out of my mind, not knowing what to expect. And I go into group therapy and I sit in this room with all these women who have these horrible life stories, you know, domestic abuse. One woman had lost a child, right? And I hadn't even lived my life yet. I didn't know why I was depressed. So now I'm feeling guilty for being in this room because I have no reason to be there. So they load me up with more meds. They send me home. And you know what? I made it through the holidays for the sake of my family. But after the first of the year, I really tanked. And I went back and I was like, look, I'm going to succeed in killing myself if you don't give me something else. And they said, we only have one option left. And I said, what is it? And they said, it's electroshock therapy. And I said, is it going to help? And they said, yes. So I'm over 18. I can sign on the dotted line. Again, I have no idea what I'm in for. My parents were just kind of trying to deal with it as best as they could. And the next morning, they wheel me down into the secret parts of the mental institution in this basement that looks, I'm not kidding you, like Frankenstein's laboratory. And they strap me down. Yeah, I mean, like the dials, the whirring, like, I mean, the stereotypical crazy, huge metal doors. I mean, just really nightmarish. And they strapped down my arms and legs, and then someone pushed my head down against the gurney and strapped it down. And they started an IV on me, and then everything got kind of woozy. And the last thing I remember is this huge guy coming up from behind me with these two metal probes in his hand. And then everything went black. And when I woke up, I had a headache that would kill a horse. And I went through those treatments every other day until I got discharged. And then they made me come 3 days a week as an outpatient to continue doing this. And it was so scary. I mean, my entire concept of life completely broke down. I'm 18, 19 years old, thought I had an entire life ahead of me. Now I'm the crazy girl who's getting shock therapy treatment. So there's no future for me. I mean, who's going to want to hire me? Who's going to want to marry me? All these things are going through my head, right? And then my body started to break down from the stress. And the thing that really kind of did it in for me is I was sitting at dinner one night with my little brother, and he's telling the story about this time we went out and rode our ponies together, about how it was this great time. Remember, we went here. Dad said, don't go there. And we went there. Like, he's just going on. And you did this for me. And we went through the creek and we got wet. And then we were afraid Dad was going to find out. He's just like all these details. And I can't remember anything he's talking about. And he's starting to get really upset. That was an important day for him. And, you know, I couldn't remember anything. So I just sort of faked it. And I was like, oh yeah. We went there and there and there. And he's like, yeah, you remember. So I pushed myself away from the table. I went into my room and I pulled out a photo album, and I realized my childhood memories were just completely gone, just completely erased. I couldn't remember anything. And that's what freaked me out enough that I went in the next day and I was like, guess what? It's working. I feel great. I'm not depressed anymore. And they're like, okay, prove it. You know, get a job, get re-enrolled back in school, show us you can function. And so that's when I just started playing the part and faking being happy, because I was not going back to any of that ever again.
A lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
The fact that you signed the dotted line yourself is almost, unbelievable in itself. Not because it's not believable, but it's just like that you were willing to take that, step. And like we talked about pre-episode, like the fact that this is actually a treatment in our lifetime that people still do.
Yeah. I mean,
is incredible.
it's pretty crazy to think that it happens to people. Obviously, it wasn't explained to me. I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into. This was the last ditch effort. This was the last option I was presented with. And I really did not want to live anymore. The only reason I was hanging on is because I couldn't live with the thought of my family being devastated by the fact that they just found me dead somewhere one day. I mean, I just didn't want to do that to them. So that's why I was really just putting everything in that I had left to try to hang on. And I guess in a way it helped, and in a way it really didn't, because I left there not only faking being happy, never having dealt with the reason I was depressed to begin with, but then having to unpack all of that trauma related to that at the same time. It made for some rough road ahead, let's say.
Yeah. I want to go there, but I want to go down the road. So bear with me for a second. So and you kind of said this, your parents are trying to be supportive. You don't know exactly why you're depressed. And mental conditions like depressions are for a guy like me, are the hardest, because I think men in general are kind of like black and white. Like when my wife has a problem, I'm like, okay, here's the solution. But she didn't actually want the solution. She just needed support in it. Right. And I've learned that because I'm 47 years old.
Good.
But I'm a black and white. Tell me the problem, I will solve it. I'm a problem solver. And so I'm just thinking both for you on one side and then your parents or friends around you, when you can't see the problem, when you can't see the ailment.
Right.
But yet, and seemingly for you didn't have at least I didn't hear this traumatic event, like you said, comparing other women or other people that were around you that had done it.
Right.
But it didn't change the way you felt.
Right.
It doesn't change that you didn't have a problem or an issue or depression. But for people around you, that's got to be difficult with knowing because you can't see it. You don't know how to treat it. You're like, damn, why are you just unhappy?
Yeah.
Because I think my first reaction, being uneducated probably 20 years ago, I think I'm educated now, understand mental conditions, especially doing this show. But that's a really difficult thing to get your arms around.
It's super difficult. And I think that's why it's so difficult to treat. I look at therapists and doctors, right? I was a paramedic before I went to law school, and we got to do different hands-on things. We got to kind of see things. We got to go to a cadaver lab. So let's say you're a medical student or a doctor, and you got to see, the inside of a human being. You got to see a heart, and you got to study it, and you saw how it worked mechanically, right? So you kind of have that thing going for you. And any human being can understand physical pain. So if you're a doctor treating a heart attack, you can kind of put the pieces together and understand what's going on and kind of how to treat it. But if you're a doctor or a therapist who's never been depressed, how do you go about treating it? Because if you don't understand what it feels like, there's no really physical mechanism to sort of lean back on to help you get there. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's not treated as well as it should be.
Yeah. And firsthand experience is, but then at the same time, if everyone was depressed, they probably wouldn't be in the position they are. But it's almost still I still heard also the themes that I hate, and Chris will relate to this, but to throw in the medication at it, that didn't help, that probably even set you back potentially.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it did. I think it just snowballed everything pretty rapidly on me. It was my body couldn't handle it. I had the worst side effects, and I'm not saying that medication isn't helpful from time to time, depending on what's going on. And again, I'm not a doctor, but I think it's utilized wrongly a lot of the times too. And to have thrown that much at a 16-year-old kid and not helped any other way. I mean, there was no mention of coping mechanisms. There was no, let's get down to the source of this. I mean, there was talk therapy. But I had one therapist say to me, it's okay to be depressed. It's okay to be depressed. No, it's not. This is not how you're supposed to be living your life. It's okay to have feelings, and it's okay to process through those, but it's not okay to sit in a perpetual state of depression. So, I think that maybe people aren't as educated as they should be, people who are treating this. And also I run into quite a few therapists and doctors who have their own issues that haven't dealt with them. And then that gets in the way and adds an extra layer, right? So you have to be really careful about the people that you're seeking help from.
Yeah. Chris, any questions here before we transition to ultimately, I think the brighter side of this story, because you've obviously come on the other end of it. It's so interesting talking to someone, that's as credible as you are. You're a lawyer. You've done incredible things. And just to think of the depths that you were at, it goes to show you that, I don't know, you only know what you know, because people can fool you or, convince you that there's nothing, I got just talking to you, you seem just credible and normal and all this stuff, but you went through shock therapy.
Yeah. I don't know about the normal part, but
I know nobody's normal. We're all normal in our own mind. Right.
Sure.
But, or not normal, but it's seriously like you went through shock therapy. You got put on the board. Like I'm thinking American Horror Story, when you were telling that story, I'm seeing like the movies on TV and I'm like, I just thought this was a movie. This shit really happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's really scary is it wasn't that long ago they were doing it to people without anesthesia. Could you imagine that?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I'm sitting here as you're telling your story. I'm thinking of me being in, a county detox facility, Marchman acted. A lot of things I can relate with, mine was a lot of it was addiction related, but it's very similar. It's mental health, right? And that even my experience with that, I thought when you said it exactly, I was so tired of seeing therapists and doctors that have never even experienced addiction and could understand it. And I even got to a point where I'm like, I'm not even going to talk to a therapist unless you're in a recovering addict yourself or alcoholic, have addiction experience, whatever you want to call it, substance abuse. You can't relate with me. It's like, if I want to be a doctor, I'm going to go learn from a doctor. So it's kind of the same thing with a therapist. And I think you're absolutely right. And I know therapists that, I hate to say this, but I don't think they should be therapists. They're crazier than anyone I know, right? So there's so many, it's making me think back, some of my experience with, treatment centers and even the legal system where it's like, are we doing more damage at times for stuff that's really more of a mental health than, I don't know what other category you put it in, but I know for myself, I had experiences within treatment centers or wherever that required more work. Like it brought me more trauma, if you want to call it. I don't know about trauma, but it was like, it further confused me. And I remember, like you said, being in this county detox facility surrounded by people that I didn't have a story like them. I couldn't relate with them really. It was mostly a lot of homeless people and people detoxing that were in county jail. And I was like 18 and I'm like, all right, like I'm not 40. I didn't lose my wife and my kids and all this stuff. So a lot of what you talked about, like, I think for years I had to unpack a lot of that, honestly. I think, cause it didn't keep me sober, any of those places, ultimately.
Yeah. It's really rough, I think, because a lot of these people are sort of set up to treat on this protocol, right? You do this and then you do this and then you do this. And I tell you to do this. And maybe I give you some homework or whatever else I'm supposed to do. But for a lot of people, we just don't fit the protocol. I certainly didn't. No one understood why I was depressed. If it was just a chemical imbalance, then the medication should have worked and it didn't, right? So why is this person walking around like this? What do we need to know about her that's different that we, let's look at it from a lot of different angles, but our medical system just isn't set up to treat that way, which I'm sure you both know, right? It doesn't matter if it's physical or mental.
Yeah. Well, we're treating, the symptoms and whatever they are, like it with the medication typically. And the doctors are, I think there's a lot of good doctors that are doing their best, but I don't know that and that's part of why we have this show. It's mind, body, energy. And it's the combination of those three things. If it was just the body, it would be a lot easier. But the mind controls a lot and is the, central, the key to making it all work. Because we've said it many times, I use the analogy, you can be ripped and have a six pack and be, the most lost person on earth, because if your head's not right, your energy's not right, like all those things play the role that they do. Dannie, let's talk happiness though. Well, ultimately what got us to the other side, and where did the turn happen?
Where did the turn happen? So yeah, I was determined, right? I had been told by a lot of people that the reason that I suffered so much was because I just didn't do things the way that everyone else did them. I was always questioning things. I was always trying to do it a different way. And if I would just knock that off and go with the flow and do it like everyone else, then I would just be so much happier.
Dannie.
Yeah. Just do it the way we're doing it, and it'll be so much easier. So yeah, what do I do? So I go back to college. Somehow I managed to graduate. I go to law school. I graduate there, pass the bar, and then I'm living the life that, I thought everybody wanted to live, the life that I was supposed to live. So I've got the car, I've got the house, got a great job, even had the husband at the time. And, I'm going day to day through life. I go to work, I go to the gym, I pay my taxes, buy my groceries, but I was miserable. And I knew I was miserable, but I didn't know how to change it. And after everything I'd gone through, I was not going to ask for help. So I just, pulled myself together every morning and made it through the day and crashed at the end of the day. And then I had my daughter. And when she was about a year old, I was making dinner one night. I was in the kitchen and I was making my famous spaghetti sauce. So it's a long process, lots of stirring. She's on the floor and she's got her play bowls and spoons and she's just having a good time. And she pauses and she looks up at me and she grabs a bowl and a spoon and she starts mimicking my behavior. She's stirring just like I was stirring and made sure to, make sure I was validating the fact that she was doing what I was doing. So I bent over and I said, yeah, just like mommy. And as soon as those words came out of my mouth, I almost fainted on top of my daughter. I thought I was going to throw up all over the kitchen. And I just laid on the floor next to her and grabbed her in my arms and started sobbing, because I realized that it didn't matter what I said. It mattered what I did. She was copying my every move, and I'm showing her how to live this awful, depressed, lonely, unfulfilled life. And the thought of her having to go through what I went through, the shock therapy, the treatment, being ostracized, all of that, it was not going to happen. So I made her a deal right then and there on the floor that I was going to learn everything there was to know about being happy, because I had been told I was not wired for happiness. It could never happen for me. But I thought if I learned enough and taught her at an early enough age, she could avoid all the things that I went through. So I started studying happiness like I was studying for the bar exam all over again. And I just started going to all the places I could to try to get the answers to the questions. What is happiness? How do I get it? Why am I here? How can I make the best of life? Thinking that, again, if I taught her, that she could avoid the things that I had gone through. But of course, when I started implementing a lot of this stuff, my life very rapidly started to change. And I realized I could be wired for happiness. I just didn't know how to do it. And so I think that if anyone can kind of do the same sort of things, it's a trial and error process for everybody. But if I can pull myself out of where I was, I know anyone can do it.
What is ultimately, finding finding happiness, so to speak? We talked a bit about and I think you probably experienced this, which is why you didn't find it, the faux happiness, trying to make yourself happy, but not really doing it. And so what were those, what are the variables of happiness?
I think the variables can differ. It's not a finding, right? It's a settling into. You've got to understand that the happiness is there. You've just got to connect with it. So if you're looking for happiness anywhere external to you, it's not going to show up, right? It's not going to show up in any amount of money. It is not going to show up in any relationship. I mean, I threw myself into being a mother. I was hanging on to that with everything I had because it was the one thing that I thought that made me happy. But I can't rely on my daughter for my happiness. I can't rely on any person. And there's no set of circumstances either. I had a mentor once who said the most amazing thing to me. He said, Danny, people made a lot of money during the Great Depression, right? So even in the worst set of circumstances, you can still connect to happiness, to gratitude, to the things that ground you, to something bigger than yourself, and see the bigger picture. So for me, it was really sort of it's sort of a woo-woo thing, but it's a coming home to, right? The happiness is always here. I just didn't see it because of all the things that were blocking it.
Yeah. And we never know what those blocks will be, do we?
There's so many. There's so many.
I think, and then we got a world that sort of conditions us towards, other things. So that doesn't help either, right? And social media and all these things now that are, I don't know, and I love social media, but it empowers a lot of good, but it also kind of fosters, I think, some falsehoods, especially as happiness goes.
Yeah. And I think that's only because we're not equipped for it. I believe that life is a mirror. It's always showing you something about yourself. So if you are looking at social media and you're having a really hard time with it, with envy or, self-love or whatever your issue is, it's showing you what you need to work on yourself. Because if you're, competent and strong in those areas, it really shouldn't bother you.
How did you work with people now as a happiness coach? What's that process?
Oh, again, so, just like I was saying, how the medical system sort of has these protocols. I don't necessarily have one of those. I think everybody's a little bit different. Everybody has a place that they're starting from differently and a place where they want to go. But what I generally start with is, kind of starting to separate all of the voices in your head from your one true voice, right? We walk around all day and we've got all this stuff going on in our head. Most of those voices aren't ours. They're voices we've adopted as kids or throughout our lifetime, or people who are talking to us now, or sometimes we're just not even conscious of what we're letting in. So how do you diffuse all of that noise and then just really get back to that one voice inside of you that is connected to your happiness? And when you figure out where that voice is again and you start to trust it, it will tell you everything you need to know about being happy. It never lies. But you've got to be brave enough to get in there and hear it. And sometimes when you do that, a lot of other past crap comes up and you've got to deal with it along the way. And that's a difficult thing for people to do. We don't like to sit with negative emotions. That's why we suppress them and then they just become more of an issue down the road. But if you can learn to sit with that in real time while you're listening to that voice, then you get the real answer. So now you've got to be honest with yourself about what that voice is saying, which is the first part of it. And then the second part is being brave enough to act in conformity with that voice, despite what your spouse is saying, what your kids are saying about you or think about you, what, society says, what, your parents have to say. You've got to filter out all of that and be brave enough to act on what it is that's going to make you happy, despite all of this other stuff going on in the world. And these are very difficult things to do. I mean, we, like you were saying, conform, right? That's what we're taught to do, to fit into the social hierarchy of things, to have a place, because standing out is really, really scary. So those things take some time, and we keep using the term unpack. There's a lot of things to unpack and to renounce and sort of clear out before you can really be who you were meant to be.
Listening to you talk, and this is how my brain works. I hear lots of things and I break it down to what I'm hearing. It's really like self-mastery, isn't it? It's like mastering oneself in a lot of ways. But
it's a process that never stops, because
there's no
always
destination.
Changing.
It's an ongoing journey. Self-mastery.
So as soon as you think you've got a hold of yourself, you'll see something else creep in and you're like, oh, I didn't even know that was there, or this is a new development. And, again, having enough bravery to take a look at it because it's something you didn't deal with before.
Yeah. That voice inside your head. I mean, is that, I've taken enough training or done and learned enough or read enough that like that's the ego. Is that your ego talking?
Yeah. I don't listen to the voice in my head. I listen to the voice in my heart. And happiness is not a thinking thing. It's a feeling thing. And I think that's one thing that we're not taught, is how to feel our way through life. Again, very scary things. There aren't very many people out there who are good enough at it to teach it. But if someone had taught me how to do that as a 7 or 8-year-old, I don't think I ever would have gone through the things that I went through.
What are some of the things you're seeing working with other people? Like maybe some, not naming names, but just experiences and stuff that you feel like, you're both excited about or even surprised by, like, because I'm sure working with others is much different than working on yourself, while you have the experience and what you're kind of looking at.
Yeah. Well, it is and it isn't, right? Again, I think life is a mirror. So whenever I have a client saying something to me, I also sort of file it away because maybe it's something that I need to take a look at, right? I'm really interested in the fact that things that my clients bring up are things that I need to look at as well. And again, you're always working on it. I think for a lot of my clients, and what I find, especially with men, because a lot of my clients are men, is this is kind of what I see happening is I see, men are very dutiful in how they approach life, and they go through the motions and they conform, as you said. So I'm supposed to go to college and I'm supposed to develop a career. And then after a certain amount of time, I'm supposed to get married and have children, provide for my family. And then I'm supposed to, produce this home with the white picket fence and the dog in the backyard. And then I'm supposed to elevate my career and I'm supposed to be the best at it and, be a name in the community and in my profession. And they go through all of these milestones very dutifully, working very, very hard. And then they kind of come to the end of all of that and they look around and they realize that part of them isn't really in it. They've just sort of been going milestone to milestone, going motion to motion, but really lost themselves in the process. And so they kind of have this feeling of where am I in all this? Where do I fit in? Where's this, this existential me in all of this? So we kind of work a little bit on sort of feeling reconnected to life and to the choices that they've made and then where they want to go from there. And again, it's a really scary thing to look at as a man, especially if you're the sole provider for your family. All of a sudden, you're going to change your life. How does your spouse feel about that? You've got kids that need to be fed and sent to school, right? So there's a lot to really deal with in real time. How do you just take it step by step and break it down so that it's manageable? Are
there techniques like, we love action here on the show, like some, maybe techniques that our listeners could do or that help do some of these things? Yeah.
So I look at a lot of different aspects of things. I study nutrition a lot. So a lot of times, clients will change their diet. Sugar feeds anxiety and depression like you wouldn't believe. I don't drink alcohol. I know, right? I don't drink alcohol. That's something I can't do. It doesn't, my nervous system just can't handle it. So, maybe that's something, just sort of lifestyle changes that people need to change. Maybe they need to change their sleep patterns. And I really into the neuroscience part of it too. So ways that you can trigger your parasympathetic nervous system. How can you calm yourself down? I have this little bag I carry with me everywhere that I use for my daughter all the time with all these little things easy things that will just trigger your parasympathetic nervous system when you're kind of losing it a little bit, when you're going through it. So, lip balm. You have so many nerve endings in your lips. You can just put that on for a little while. It'll trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, calm you down. And then there's all the science about cold plunges, cold therapy, I think is great. I use a sauna. I'm very much a proponent about being outside, in daylight, which, if you're in a warmer climate is a little bit easier, but I live in kind of a cold gray climate. So I've really got to force myself to do it and force other people to do it. So there's actionable things like that. I spend the first 15 minutes of my day sort of acclimating my brain to being a human being on this planet. I use a vibration plate. I do a meditation and a gratitude practice. I do cold therapy, and then I kind of go through things to help me trigger myself throughout the day. When I wake up, the first thing I see on the wall opposite my bed is a picture of my daughter and a sign that says, when you feel like quitting, remember why you started, right? Because I really did it for her. And now I have someone watching me every single day, right? So I know that if I don't put 100% into it, I'm teaching her how not to put 100% into her happiness, into her life. And that's just not acceptable. So anytime I need a little bit of a jolt, I've got one right there, and you've got to find that for yourself, whatever that is. What is so massive, what is on the line for you in such a way that that's what's going to help you do what you need to do to get where you want to be. Because it's not about getting there, right? It's not about the accomplishment. It's about who you become while you're trying to get there. And I think if we could place more value on that, then people would be a lot happier as well.
I just ordered a couple cases of lip balm. So it's on the way.
I'll send you some. I'll send you a little kit if you want. You can keep one in your car.
I know. When I'm about to lose it, like in the car or, with my kids, I'm going to get that lip balm out. I'm going to rub that stuff so hard into my lips.
Yeah. Well, another thing about your car too is, just practicing being present, because happiness doesn't live in the past. It doesn't live in the future. It lives right now. So if you can implement little ways to bring yourself back to your body and your breath in the present moment. Every time we stop at a red light, my daughter and I take a really deep breath. I have one of those cars that has like the automatic start things, right? So I always tell her, and my car takes a deep breath at the red light. We're going to do the same thing. Just to, remind yourself, we get so stuck in the seriousness of things, and just, laugh at yourself, because how serious is it? Feels really serious right now, but is it really that big of a deal? Is it really an emergency? Do you really need to put this much energy into it? Or can you just enjoy the fact that, you're driving a car? I mean, what a cool thing. Like, it's just, flying in an airplane, like you're in the sky. Like, how amazing is that? You just get to celebrate life when you want to. And we just take that for granted.
Yeah, that road rage has got to go. I got to stop. I got to take a breath, stop yelling at the guy next to me for, cutting me off.
Take a breath, put on some lip balm.
I mean, you know what? You can still do both. You can yell.
And then it's the biggest guy on the airplane. If I'm not in first class, bitching about the guy that's spilling over on top. And I'm like, dude, I am 6'5", 270. I'm the one that needs to be spilling on you.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. A great meditation on the airplane is just to look out the window. I mean,
I just go to sleep now.
Incredible.
I'm just like, close my eyes with my headphones on. I'm like, Calgon, take me away.
Yeah.
Chris, any final thoughts or questions for Dannie here?
I just want to say thank you. It's inspiring, your story. Everything you said I aligned with. I think one thing you said that I loved was, you don't find happiness, you settle into it. I think that is so beautifully put, and that one, I'm going to steal that quote, because I think that's exactly what it is. You can chase all you want, right? We're all constantly distracted. The social media, trying to play keep up with the Joneses, where you said it's like gratitude, be in the moment. I mean, even when I'm in difficulties now, I'm like, well, I don't know anyone else going through this, so that means I must be extraordinary and unique in a good way. Like, usually it's with business challenges and stuff like that, where it's like I welcome the problems, because that means I'm doing something. It's an opportunity to grow, to evolve. It's a total frame shift.
Yeah, if you're leaning into that, then that's really the name of the game. These are all lessons, right?
Yeah. Radical acceptance of whatever's coming, and just knowing, all right, I'll be good. It's not going to kill me. And if I'm still breathing, I'm still got a chance. And if you really look at your history, like, you've always made it through your challenges. You're standing here right now. Have trust in yourself and your own history.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, existence is proof of ability to get through it in a lot of ways. And Dannie, you are the greatest proof of that, making it through what you got through, and shock therapy. Good grief. I still can't, my mind can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, trust me. I'm still trying to figure that one out too.
I mean, can you I know you lost the memory, but do you feel what you went through there? Do you feel it, the physical part of it? Can you remember the pain?
Oh yeah, I had the headaches for a really long time. And I mean, the memory did come back after several years, slowly sort of creeped back in there. But, there's still things that happen sometimes that are a little bit weird. And I'm like, oh, they probably rewired that for me when I went through whatever I went through, right?
Dannie, where can everybody keep up with everything you're doing, your coaching, and all the other stuff?
Everything's on my website. It's DannieDeNovo.com.
DannieDeNovo.com. We'll have that in the show notes. We really appreciate you coming on Vibe Science.
Oh, so good to be with you. Thank you.
Hey guys, you know where to find us, vibescience.com. Find links to all the show notes, episode info, Dannie's contact, and how to get in touch with Chris and I. We're here for you. Take you to your highest vibe. We'll see you next time on Vibe Science.
The content discussed on this show is provided for reference and educational purposes. The content is not an attempt to practice medicine or provide specific medical advice. Always consult your personal physician for medical advice and proper diagnosis.
Thanks for listening. This is Vibe Science. To learn more or watch full episodes, visit vibesciencepodcast.com. Here's to discovering your highest vibe.